Life is expensive for many these days, but for young people, the affordability problem is one that might set them back for life. One of the measures from Youthful Cities' Real Affordability Index shows that, on average, 15 to 29-year-olds living in a city wind up $750 in the hole every month. And working full-time is no guarantee of changing that. Robert Barnard is Executive Director of Youthful Cities. Robert, great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. Great to be here.
So it's a bit of an alarming stat, so I guess I wanted to start with perspective on it. How does it compare to the historical number? Are young people always poor when they live in cities, or is it particularly bad now?
I think young people always start off with obviously less accumulated income and wealth, but this is particularly bad. I think every generation thinks that they had it tough when they were young, but just to set the context of it, no living generation has just been through a 2-year pandemic and stuck at unemployment rates that almost reached 30% for young people during the pandemic. And so we wanted to take a look at where affordability was in 27 cities across Canada for young people. And as you said right off the top, it's pretty bad. No matter what size of the city we looked at, they were losing money.
In fact, I mean, the one that jumped out at me, and maybe it's because I'm from there, is Winnipeg. It's particularly unaffordable. It can't be because it's more expensive to live there than Toronto. That doesn't make sense. It must be because wages aren't good, I'm going to assume. Or maybe there's other costs that are higher. How much of this is the actual living things like rent, transit, the day-to-day life costs? How much of it is that incomes aren't keeping up?
Well, unfortunately, it's a combination of both for young people. So incomes aren't keeping up, and we've talked about boosting that minimum wage because young people are more likely to be minimum wage workers. And the second part is the costs are accelerating. So we hear lots about that in the news these days of housing costs, but we also have increased education costs and just living costs generally for young people as we looked at all the cities. And as you said, that's one of the challenges in Winnipeg is actually a combination of both low wages and increasing costs across the board. So
when you've seen wages go up, we have seen some movement on that. How much does it help when minimum wage rises slightly? Is that a material difference, or do you look to the other side and say, actually, rental costs, housing costs need to come down a lot more before that $5 move in some cases is going to budge?
If we look at the amount that's going to cost to live in these cities, we looked at what we call a living wage, which is what would we need in order to meet that cost of a city. And that ranged between $2 and $9 more than the minimum wage. So we've kind of set an average saying if you could move it up by $5 in every province over the next 3 years, we would have a start. But that still assumes that young people have a full-time job. And right now, only half of 15 to 24-year-olds have a full-time job. So it's a combination of things that are going to make it better for young people, which is absolutely needed.
I mean, we talked about wages could come up. Obviously, minimum wage can come up. Affordability could be improved through housing. What are some other things? What are the policies top of your list that you would say do this to help young people live in cities?
Yeah, 3 things right off the bat. One is get rent under control with young people. Like there isn't really a youth housing strategy in Canada to help that generation get off its feet. Secondly is to reduce education costs. They're just accelerating at a rate that young people can't afford. And that's just not just the cost of education, but talking to a student today, just the cost of books is accelerating. So that's a challenge for them. And the third one is transportation. That's a huge cost for young people to move around to their work. And that's actually something that municipalities have the control to reduce and make their cities more affordable for young people as they try to live in those cities.
Robert, it's so good to have you with us. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Amanda.
Robert Barnard is co-founder of Youthful Cities. Time now for the takeaway and when to leave well enough alone. Politicians of all stripes like to talk as though they alone have the answer to thorny problems. So when it comes to affordability and inflation, it's no surprise that every party has a plan they think would work. Factor in the politics and you can safely ignore much of it. But sometimes the ideas are so bad they deserve airtime. The NDP is taking on Canada's grocers and accusing them of profiting from inflation. Jagmeet Singh would like to tax that extra profit so that it is skimmed away from the greedy corporations. Trouble is, grocers are just about the last place to look for excess profit. As any kid with a paper route will tell you, what matters isn't your top line or the dollars you make in sales, but your bottom line, what you actually put in your pocket, profit margin, in other words, or the rate of profit accounting for your costs. Grocers have one of the lowest rates of profit going, something like 3% in a good year. You might wonder why they bother at all. It is true that some of Canada's biggest grocers have managed to cut some costs temporarily and also possibly pass on inflation to you and me, but the jump in their profits is hardly excessive and it is surely temporary. But what is excessive when it comes to profit? It's a question we need to ask because here again, politicians seem to have an answer of their own making. What is too much when it comes to the amount a business can earn over its costs? Why not go after beer makers with profit margins of 26%, or home builders, which enjoy margins north of 13%? Or better still, tell dairy farmers they're doing fine with profit margins of 21%. If there's enough competition in an industry, it's really up to consumers to decide if they want the product at the price offered. My takeaway? If politicians really wanted to help, they could leave the money in our pocket to begin with by lowering taxes, and they could make sure industries aren't protected from competition. Anything else is likely to do more harm than good. That's Taking Stock for this week. I'm Amanda Lang. Thanks for being with us.